We finally got that September and October ban list, but it's probably not the list that everyone was hoping for. So what is up guys, this is Tcg Sam here, and in today's video I'm going to be going over the new recent September 26th ban list, and I'm going to be going over what I think each hit is going to do to the current Yu-Gi-Oh meta and what decks are going to be the best decks moving forward. So if you guys enjoy this type of content, be sure to let me know by leaving a like, commenting, and subscribing. But with that being said, let's just hop straight into it. So the very first hit is Fairy Tale Snow. A very deserved hit. This card was absolutely insane in so many decks out there, not even just tier elements. Like any punk variant or adventure variant was playing this card, and this card just honestly makes it so those decks always have a free disruption and always have free level 4 bodies that keep coming back, and that's what made it incredibly unfair. And also the ease of access for it, even in a deck like Branded, for example, you can dump it with Branded Fusion, but what I meant by ease of access was something like Curious, for example. You were just always able to dump this to the graveyard, and this card is honestly just super insane. Definitely deserved to get hit. Will it kill tier elements? Absolutely not. It was definitely a needed hit, but it's not enough alone to be able to actually stop the tier elements deck from being the best deck of the format, in my opinion. But overall, this was a very warranted hit. Next up is Ronin Totem. This one is interesting because Sprite I didn't feel was particularly oppressive is the word compared to something like Tier Elements. It has a lot of representation in Top Cup, but it also doesn't really do anything unfairly, whereas a deck like Tier Element has some very unfair combos that it's able to have access to. Ronin Totem is definitely a big hit to Sprite. It's not going to completely kill the deck, but it severely lowers the ceiling of the deck, in my opinion, because now it's a lot more difficult to make a very standard end board of Toad and Elf. You need to go jump through a couple of extra hoops in order to be able to get there, and it also takes away follow up in your graveyard for future turns, which can be huge when your opponent's trying to break your board. So Ronin Totem, I don't think anyone saw this coming, really. Did they need to hit it? Probably not, in my opinion. I feel like just leaving Sprite as it was okay. I still think Tier Element would be the best deck even without Snow. But yeah, now hitting Ronin Totem makes it so a deck like Pure Sprite's going to struggle a lot more. You're probably going to have to play a deck like Runic Sprite in order to actually have Sprite be competitively viable, in my opinion. That's not to say Pure Sprite is a bad deck now, but it definitely becomes a lot worse than it was before, and it's a lot more difficult to play it. Moving on, Christian Haka Fibrax, also a very warranted hit. This card is just one of the best Link monsters in the game. It should have been hit a long time ago, in my opinion, even though right now it doesn't necessarily isn't necessarily being used in too many of the big top decks like Active Sister, Tier Element, Sprite, but still a very powerful card. It also facilitated combos like the deck, the Scythe Lock. So getting rid of Haka Firebrax now makes it so there's one a little harder. It's a little harder to resolve that degenerate Scythe combo. But it also just takes away a really generic, powerful Link monster that can just summon any tuner from the deck. Definitely a good hit, in my opinion. Will it kill any decks outright? Probably a few of the fringe decks on the side, but for a deck for example, let's say Punk, Pure Punk, Punk Synchro, Dragon Link, I don't think it'll kill those decks, but it'll definitely take away a very powerful option that they had in their extra deck. Definitely a good hit though, and it's definitely a well-deserved. Next up, Chaos Ruler, also a very warranted hit, in my opinion. This card is incredibly powerful. Being able to just dump infinite cards to the graveyard, get some advantage, trigger all the graveyard effects, have it come back later on, and the fact that it's generic and very easy to access with something like the Punk engine just made it so I think this card definitely should go. Was it one of the biggest problem cards? No, but it's definitely a card that just does warrant being hit. It definitely is not gonna kill the Punk engine outright. You can still use the Punk engine to get access to a free level 8 synchro, which can be very good. or like a free level 11 synchro, because the Deerno will be able to bring back the Zeoman from the graveyard, and that could still be really good in some decks. But now you're probably just gonna see Punk splash as an engine much less outside of like the pure deck, so something just to keep in mind. In terms of the other hits, Red Reboot, I mean, the Red Reboot definitely was a really good card. I don't know if they should have hit this, because Red Reboot was not only an answer to like trap decks, but it was also an answer to like really oppressive cards in like combo decks, for example. So when a combo deck's able to play cards like Floodgates, like Dimensional Barrier, Rivalry Warlord, stuff like that, that's when it becomes particularly unfair, just because now your opponent has to consider citing its spell and trap removal in addition to the regular combo hate cards. That can just be really problematic. Taking away Red Reboot, like, yeah, Red Reboot was an insane card and it felt really sacky when you drew it, but like now I think it's definitely going to be a little harder to answer those trap decks, and now you're going to get blown out more often by those power cards like Dimensional Barrier, even in like a combo matchup, which is a little unfortunate. But I mean, yeah, I would say it's a card that definitely could have been banned. Like, it's powerful enough to be banned, but was it a good hit in my opinion? I don't think so, but I guess we'll see if it really matters in the end, because it is just a one-up, of course. That's it for the ban section. The only really like meta warping hit I think would be the Rodent Totem. It definitely makes it so Sprite is a lot weaker now. Definitely not out of the meta, but a lot weaker now that they lost Rodent Totem. Moving on to the limited section, Steam the Cloak. This is fine. Without Hulk, it shouldn't really do anything. I don't think it's a particularly insane card without a card like Hulk of Fibrax, so definitely doesn't really change anything. Cyber Jar's interesting. I don't think it really matters. It's like, cool, they're bringing back these old cards that used to be like really broken, but now it just doesn't really matter. I don't think anyone's ever going to use it outside of like maybe some niche FDK or something. Mech Phantom Beast O-Line, similarly to Steam the Cloak, probably isn't going to do anything without Hulk of Fibrax. It's definitely okay for it to come back. Substitute is interesting. I've heard like Sprite players maybe want to test out like one Substitute in the deck just to be able to bring out like Swap Frog easier, but like I'm not so sure that's very viable considering Substitute isn't a level 2 and you can't bring it out with like Gigantic. But just something to keep in mind, like it isn't like the most irrelevant card to bring back, so something to keep in mind. Probably won't make that big of a meta impact in my opinion, but it's still something like that's an option out there for like Sprite players. Moving for the next limited card, Spellbook of Judgment. This one is very interesting. I said in my banlist prediction, I don't think this card is gonna do that much, and I still go by that. I don't think this is gonna break the format or anything. Like, it'll definitely allow a few more decks to have these like cool combos where they're able to splash in like a Spellbook engine and get like insane value off of this, sure. But I don't think it's going to bring any of those decks into the meta. So like if you think about the decks that this could really be used in, well, Spellbooks, of course, but other decks that can utilize Spellbooks, maybe like Pendulum Magicians or Endymion Magicians, they might be able to try something like this. Yes, I'm aware it can summon a card like Jagan the Spiritualist, which does act like a Vandy's Emptiness, but in my opinion, it kind of just is the exact same issue that you're facing against like Fluandereeze and the Wind Barrier statue. It's like the same idea. Yeah, it's powerful, but I think this is going to be like a lot harder to pull off consistently compared to like something like Fluandereeze and Barrier Statue. So I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue. Next up, Apoya the Red Lotus. That's an interesting limit. I definitely can see why they limited it. Having a card that just gives you like free information about your opponent's entire hand and allowing you to rip out like the best card in their hand is really good, because just having that information of seeing your opponent's hand makes it so much easier to play against them. You don't have to think as much because you know exactly what your opponent will have access to most of the time. Limiting it to 1 will just make it so like you're less likely to be able to see it when going first. That's fine. You can still play it in like a combo deck like Danger Tier. You can just send it off of Curious and Griffin reset it, so you still have access to it if you really want to. But now you're not going to see like people turboing out into this card when going first. Nothing changed from in terms of new semi limits. In terms of Unlimits, Dynamite not really going to do anything. without Masterpiece in one diagram, the deck still doesn't do anything. Cyber Angel Ben 10 is interesting. Ben 10 does help decks like Drytron a lot. Bringing the third Ben 10 back makes it so like every time they're resolving a Drytron effect, they're just gonna get a +1. It just honestly feels like Konami weren't really thinking about Drytron as a deck. Like, I don't think Drytron is particularly broken compared to some of the other decks out there, but it's definitely like a deck you have to respect just because it does have access to cards like Vandy's Ruler, and that can be really powerful. They can back it up with ways to protect the Vandy's Ruler as well. And of course, just getting so much free advantage just means you're able to also do some like other shenanigans in the deck as well, I'm sure. I'm not so sure they should have brought this back to 3, but I ultimately don't think it's going to warp the meta by any means. It'll definitely make Drytron a little better than it was before, but I still don't think it'll break the meta or anything. Shooting Riser Dragon also doesn't do anything. It was only really broken because of Hulk. Now you can bring it back. It's whatever. Fusion Destiny is interesting. You can now have access to 3 Fusion Destiny plus like the 2 heroes and DPE in pretty much any deck, because you can always just activate it after you do your plays. But you probably aren't going to see people putting it in their deck, in my opinion. DPE is still an incredibly powerful card, and it hasn't gotten power crept yet, but the fact that you have to play 2 bricks in the Destiny heroes outside of like a hero deck just makes it so it doesn't feel worth it, in my opinion, to just have 3 good cards to draw, but 2 like bricks. Like, you don't want that many bricks in your deck unless your deck can play off of like very, very few cards. So for example, it helps out a deck like Invoke Dogmatic a lot, because not only do they have access to like very like powerful 1-card engines like Alistair the Invoker, Nadir Servant, stuff like that, but they also have Prosperity, so they can dig for like Fusion Destiny specifically. So yeah, it'll definitely help out decks like those. Of course, hero players get a boost as well. This card is insane in its own deck. Who would have thought? But yeah, not gonna also warp the meta, but definitely a nice boost to those like rogue decks. Same idea with the Nadir Servant. Not only does it help like Invoke Dogmatica, you could maybe consider playing the Dogmatica engine as like an actual engine in more decks now, just because you're also able to activate Nadir Servant like after you do all your like extra deck plays. It doesn't lock you for the entire turn, it only locks you for the rest of the turn, and that can be really good if you need to dump something like El Shell Aquilum to the graveyard, and then you get to search Shell Schism, and then you get to make a window on your opponent's turn. That can be really good. Trickstar Light Stage, cool. Trickstar's not going to do anything. It was an engine in Sprite, which is interesting. So having an extra extender in the Sprite deck now could be very helpful, considering they just lost one of their best ones in Ronin Totem. It might see more play in the Sprite decks, but outside of that, it definitely won't really do anything, in my opinion. And Wall of Revealing Light, this card is way past its prime. It's not really going to do anything either. So yeah, those are just some of my general thoughts and first impressions of the ban list on what I think each hit is going to do to the meta. Overall, I think the meta is still going to stay relatively the same. Trailman, in my opinion, is going to be like the best deck, even more so now that their biggest competitor in Sprite lost like one of their key cards. I don't think Snow served like anywhere close to like the same importance as Ronin Totem was in Sprite decks. So even though Tears lost Snow, like they still have access to very, very broken cards like Curious. The fact that they still have access to Curious makes it so the deck is very much still alive. Had they banned Curious and Snow, then we might have a different discussion. But the fact that Curious is still around just makes it so like combo tier is still able to dump like crazy stuff like Spell Canceller to the graveyard. And that's gonna make it very difficult for a lot of decks to play. Overall though, like I said, Tier is still gonna be the best deck in my opinion by far now. Maybe Sprite will probably be like a tier 1.5 deck is my initial guess. I could be wrong on this. Sprite can definitely switch to playing like a more stun build with like Dimension Shifters and like Mystic Minds and stuff. So it's definitely something you still gotta watch out for those cards, by the way. Like the fact that they didn't ban Shifter, they didn't ban Mind. That's definitely still an issue they need to address in my opinion. But now you might see Sprite like move towards that stun route. And and just kind of play like a resource game where you're able to like slowly out resource your opponent. Aside from that, it does like the list did help like a few decks like Drytron, Invoke Dogmatica, slap on the wrist to some other decks like the Punk Engine, Punk Adventure, Punk Synchro, Dragon Link, just a few slap on the wrist hits. Like those decks I think are still playable. They do lose quite a bit of power by losing Halka Fabrics and Chaos Ruler, but nonetheless I still think those are like decent tier 2/rogue options as well. And then finally, I think the last really relevant meta hit or like meta card would be the Spellbook Judgment. Just be aware that this is a thing now. Your opponent might be able to have access to a card like Jowgen, so just making sure you have outs to like those floodgate monsters can be really important when you're deck building. But yeah, those are just some of my initial thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, whether you agree, disagree. I'd love to hear your opinion on the ban list. Overall, I think they hit cards that definitely deserve to be hit. They brought back cards that I think could have been brought back, but I think they ultimately failed to address a lot of the problems in this game. So like Mystic Mind, Dimension Shifter, Artifact Side, just to name a few of them. Those are still running around, and those are still very much problem cards. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.